We have all been touched by the creative genius of Walt Disney, by his memorable characters, or maybe a visit to one of his theme parks. Walt was one of the most famous men of the 20th century and loved to make others smile. Throughout his early life, his years as a renowned filmmaker, and as a theme park pioneer, Walt helped us all to have a little bit more joy. Walt was born in 1901 in Chicago to Elias and Flora Disney. They later moved to Marceline, Missouri. Walt later reflected on these years of his life, saying, quote, "More things of importance happened to me in Marceline than what has happened since or what is likely to happen in the future." Early on, Walt loved to entertain others, doing anything to make others laugh. Once, Walt brought a mouse to school on a leash. The teacher screamed and threw the mouse out, but Walt got the laugh he wanted. Walt also showed an ability to draw at an early age. One of his most valuable possessions was a crayon set, which Walt used to draw for fun. Doc Sherwood, the Disney's neighbor, hired Walt to draw a portrait of his horse, and paid Walt 15 cents for the job. Unfortunately, the family fell on hard times, and had to leave Marceline for Kansas City. There, Elias bought a paper route for the Kansas City Star. Walt was given a small route and had to wake up at 3:30 every morning to deliver papers in time for school. Sometimes he was so tired that he would sleep in the doorways of some of his customers. Walt later reflected on this experience, saying that it strengthened his work ethic for his entire life. When Walt became a teenager, World War I had already begun. Every young man wanted to go overseas to Europe to fight. At age 17, Walt was too young, but lied about his age and became an ambulance driver for the American Red Cross. But when Walt arrived, the war was already done, so Walt had a lot of free time to draw on the sides of his ambulances. He also picked up the bad habit of smoking, which he kept for the rest of his life. When he returned, Walt's father wanted him to go to work at his jelly factory, but Walt wanted to be an artist. He partnered with a young artist named UB Iwerks, and the two ventured into the process of animation. Walt and UB's first cartoons were called Laugh-O-Grams. Laugh-O-Grams showed fairy tales and folk stories with an added twist, but the public didn't like them, so Walt started a new series called Alice's Wonderland, where he showed a real live girl interacting in a cartoon world. Though these were popular for a time, Walt needed to declare bankruptcy and packed the $40 he had in a cardboard suitcase and headed to California, where he was eventually joined by UB Iwerks and his brother Roy. UB Iwerks supplied the animation, Roy managed the money, and Walt supplied the ideas. They were soon able to hire more artists. One of these new artists, named Lillian Bounds, caught Walt's eye. The two began dating and married June 13th, 1925. After Alice, Walt finally found his new star, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Audiences loved this new character, but Charlie Mintz, one of the distributors of the Oswald films, hired off many of Walt's staff. Mintz began to recreate the cartoons for himself. Walt had lost his star and needed to find a new one quickly, one that could surpass even the greatness of Oswald. Walt found a mouse. The Walt Disney Studios began creating new cartoons for their new character, Mickey Mouse. Mickey's first major success was in the cartoon Steamboat Willie, the first cartoon with fully synchronized sound. The cartoon, and especially Mickey Mouse, became a hit across the world and paved the way for more Mickey cartoons. Walt had found his star and the symbol of the Disney philosophy. But Walt was never satisfied with doing the same thing over and over again, no matter how popular it was. He envisioned making a feature film, a cartoon movie as it was called. Eventually, the project became Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It took the company 2 years to complete, But when it finally hit theaters in December 21st, 1937, the nation exploded. Never before had a feature-length cartoon movie with full color and full sound debuted. The audiences loved the vivid characters, lifelike movements, and heartwarming story. Snow White became the highest-grossing film of its time. With the newfound wealth, Walt built a giant studio for his crew. But the 1940s were not without problems for Walt. Walt lost millions of dollars on his next films, Pinocchio, Bambi, and Fantasia. Also, the animator strike broke out due to layoffs and forever damaged the morale at the studio and Walt's relationship with artists. The studio did recover financially, and while the studio still crafted movies into the 50s, Walt began to think of his next big endeavor, a place where parents and children could have fun together, where adults could play like children. He started to create Disneyland. To fund Disneyland, Walt turned to television. He was one of the only filmmakers of this era to support this new technology. With shows like the Mickey Mouse Club and Davy Crockett, it provided Walt with the money and publicity he needed for his dream park. Finally, on July 17th, 1955, Disneyland opened to the public. The park became an instant hit, and Walt's dream was fulfilled. Later, when he was in his 60s, Disney longed to still create. He started his most ambitious project yet, to create Epcot, standing for Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. But this was no theme park. Walt wanted to create a fully working city with people to live in. A city with no unemployment, no traffic, and no slums. Walt wanted to create a realized utopia. But Walt never was able to finish his dream. In 1966, Walt's lifetime habit of smoking caught up with him. On his deathbed, Walt described everything in Epcot to his brother Roy. On December 15th, just 10 days after his 65th birthday, Walt died of lung cancer. The company finally built Walt's dream of Epcot, but only as a theme park, showcasing cultures from around the world, and not of Walt's dream as a future utopia. As a boy and a young man, Disney loved to create and to entertain. As a filmmaker, he introduced the world to sound cartoons, feature film animations, and above all, timeless characters and stories. As a theme park pioneer, he created Disneyland, the happiest place on earth, for all families to have fun together, and dreamed of the world's utopia in the Epcot project. To everyone he met and to everyone in the world, Walt gave the gifts of joy and hope, the greatest gifts he could ever give. Thank you.